So here's the challenge we lined up for us this week. Can we explain the basic Bitcoin functions in 10 minutes? What is a blockchain anyway?
Okay, boys.
Okay, so I mean, I don't know how much you've researched this. I literally like this part of the coding cryptography part of Bitcoin is probably one of my weakest points of knowledge. But so far, one of the best explanations I've heard of it is actually in a book I'm reading right now. I'm leaving in my truck and I'm reading it during break times, coffee breaks, and lunch times at work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Book of Satoshi. I should have brought it in so I could have shown it to you. And it's basically almost a complete work of the posts that Satoshi made online prior to 2010 or whenever he went offline. And it gives a little kind of summarization, and then it gives an explanation. It gives the other person's post and then his reply to that post explaining how they're right, wrong, or whatever. Anyway, there's some really good explanations of this exact thing in there, which helped me understand it a little bit better. So anyway, I just want to recommend that book. It's an older book. I think it was published in 2014. So obviously we've come a long way since then. Some of the stuff he talks about in the beginning is a little bit outdated, but still an interesting read so far.
Yeah, anyway, that sounds really neat.
That was not necessary for this. So
there went two of our.
We didn't even get the first. We didn't even get the first. We didn't even get the first point out, and I already took us down a squirrel trail. I'll be quiet now.
Blockchain's a ledger.
Yeah, blockchain is a ledger. Yeah.
Say something intelligent, you guys.
Go for it, Ben.
It's like you're making pancakes on Sunday morning, and the first pancake includes a whole bunch of data and transactions, and you know that pancake was made at whatever it is, 10:23. That goes on the plate.
I don't usually put receipts in my pancake batter.
But then you take the stack of pancakes that you made and flip it on its side, and that becomes a block. And each pancake is a block, and it contains the data of the transactions made within, I guess, Bitcoin is right around a 10-minute time frame, and then boop, 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 boop. It's all stacked up together.
Wow. Now I'm hungry.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't heard it described like that. I think the description I liked was people call it a ledger of account, and think back to like old times when you would have had like a general store in every community, and the general store owner would have had a book, a ledger of accounts for everybody who bought and sold things there, and he would have kept a record of the credit and debits. And so that's basically your running tally. That's a ledger. Now, blockchain is a purely digital ledger, and as Ben pointed out, the timestamps are kind of what makes it unique. Every set of data that is added has the timestamp, and what has been added can't go back and be edited in any way. You can only add another block to the chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the whole thing works with cryptography. And this is the part I always kind of get messed up in my head. How
because
that
the data is hashed, right? Like that's
right.
There's the hash, and then there's the then the mining and the nodes that run a copy of the ledger. Because the hash is what in I don't know if encrypt is the correct term, but it like encodes the data to fit into the blockchain. Then the miners are the ones that are working to solve the process and confirm that block. And then once that block is confirmed, it gets added onto the blockchain and the ledger. And then each individual node, which is recording a copy of said blockchain, talks to each other, distributed and decentralized all throughout the world and then that is what is decided on as the consensus, I think is the word I'm looking for. The consensus
Yeah.
on what the most up to date.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
basically
it's based on whatever the longest chain is, and that was one of the things I learned in this book, was that the longest chain is always the one that is the true chain, essentially. And so there was all these like sort of what's the word I'm looking for? All these arguments saying, well, what about, if this happens? What if two transactions are at exactly the same second and only some of the, different nodes get different versions at the same, and they had all this kind of hypothetical what ifs laid out. And as I understand it, when that happens, if there's transactions almost get put on a side chain and then get included in another transaction further down, is almost how I saw it explained. Like it gets added into the next block or another block further down.
yeah, that sounds correct. Definitely, there's more complicated stuff here, but I mean, basically,
and I'm not a
these are some
programmer either,
security
so
measures. Like Ben mentioned, distributed ledger. So there are copies everywhere around the world, and anybody who wants one can have that copy. But then there's also the cryptography level that keeps something secure, like your account, your private key. And then there's the computing power of the network is another level of security. So it's definitely quite secure, even though people think of digital things as totally unsecure. There are technologies that can make it totally secure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if someone tries to add an erroneous transaction or an addition to the blockchain, it then gets discarded by the rest of the nodes that are saying, no, this is actually the correct one. You're the minority of this transaction record. So then that gets discarded. I think, if I remember it correctly.
Yep. No, that's correct.
Yep. And so besides these levels of security, Bitcoin was also engineered in a very fair way, centered around the proof of work and then the Bitcoin release schedule, of course. So there was no pre-mining, no pre-distribution, basically, of Bitcoin. Everyone had to work to get the Bitcoin, or else they had to buy it on the open market. So I think that's an important point. This isn't just some initial public offering thing that was cooked up to, get somebody a pile of cash.
Yeah.
That's kind of what secures the network, right? The proof of work.
Yeah, proof of work is part of it. And it's also a measure of ensuring the fairness of the money, that it's a just money, that nobody has the ability to pull the strings, or nobody started out with $1 million and everybody else was at zero. So basically making it just from the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. Which I think, and I think that's part of why why that initial mining by Satoshi, because let's be honest, he was the first miner in that sense, receiving block rewards. So I think that's why it's important that wallet is sitting there with, I think isn't it like 1 million Bitcoin in it?
I'd have to check, but it is a lot. You're definitely
it's a lot.
Correct
and
about that.
Yeah, and it's sitting there, and it's kind of the known wallet that started it and is associated with him, and nothing's ever moved, and I suspect nothing ever will, because whoever Satoshi is, that I suspect the creator of something tends to be the most idealistic, or have the greatest ideals surrounding that, and the ability to stick to those ideals. And because we see the pattern of the ideals that Satoshi put into Bitcoin and what he was trying to do, they was trying to do, I suspect that the access to that wallet has been destroyed or burned or, in some way that there's Satoshi isn't sitting there with his, keys to his wallet going someday. I think I don't think that whoever Satoshi is has to be dead for there not to be any access to that. I think that ideologically that person could have said, this is catching on. There's other nodes, there's other miners. It's, this thing is happening. All of that Bitcoin that I accumulated at the beginning, because I was the first, I'm going to basically lock it out of the system so that I do not create any advantage or be tempted to use it.
Mm.
I think that's an interesting concept. I don't know that that's true. That's somewhat speculation on my part, but wouldn't surprise me.
History
Yeah.
in the making in many ways. It's so fascinating to
Yes.
kind of makes me wish I was in on the early days. But having that record, that book sounds fascinating that you mentioned earlier, and then just trying to understand the mindset of the creators of it and
Mhm.
understanding their work. Pretty cool stuff.
Yep.